The sage Dasura, who lives on top of a tree, is educating his son in self-knowledge. And the sage Vasishta happens to be passing overhead at the time and listens in to the instruction. I suppose you could say Vasishta was in the process of leaves dropping. The young man asked, "Father, please tell me how this Sankalpa, notion, thought, idea, concept, arises and how it grows and ceases." We're really at the heart here of the Yoga Vasishta's message. And it's the understanding that's presented here which I've tried to view the rest of the text in. I'm reading this and I'm commenting on it, and some people might say I'm interpreting it. And I use this phrase, cognitive process, quite a lot. That might seem a little jarring against the Hindu context, cognitive process. But I think it fits in with the core message. We've got this word Sankalpa here, and it's the first time that the word's been explicitly mentioned, although it's probably been translated previously. And the translator in brackets has put possible meanings for this word Sankalpa: notion, thought, idea, concept. And this is what samsara is. Samsara is often described as the cycle of births and deaths, or the wheel of conditioned existence. But samsara, the sea of samsara, is actually an ocean of notions. We're caught up in ideas, we're caught up in notions. You might think, oh, you don't have notions and beliefs, you're quite straightforward and pragmatic. Not so, not so. You have notions about a world out there, you have notions about an individual self, you've got notions about a body, having a body, you've got notions about perceiving, about perception. All this is to do with cognition. Cognition is the formation of ideas, of words, of concepts, of relationships. Cognition is about identifying something which you can then attach a name to, name and form. It's different from awareness. Cognition arises within awareness. Awareness is simply awareness. Awareness does not involve thinking. Cognition is about thinking. It's about ideation, which is the word which Dasura uses next. Dasura replied, "My son, when in the infinite consciousness, the consciousness becomes aware of itself as its own object, there is the seed of ideation." Ideation is the formation of notions. And this is what I would call the beginning of the cognitive process. This is very subtle, but soon it becomes gross and fills the whole of space, as it were. When consciousness, which we can understand as just simply awareness, when consciousness is engrossed in this ideation, it thinks the object is distinct from the subject. Then the ideation begins to germinate and to grow. Ideation multiplies naturally by itself. This leads to sorrow, not to happiness. There is no cause for sorrow in this world other than this ideation. So there we have it. It's all about the formation of thoughts and notions. It's this cognitive process. This ideation or notion has really come into being by sheer coincidence. The crow alights on the palm tree and the fruit falls to the ground without any causal connection. So the crow here and the palm tree, they represent all the stuff that's going on. We make a connection. We see patterns, and from that we build up all our notions of a self and an external world. There isn't any causal connection. We make the causal connection. I hope this analogy is not too esoteric, but it reminds me of the booting process. When you start your computer, it's given the ungainly description of booting up the computer. And I think some people are a bit uncomfortable with this thing about booting the computer, but it comes from the expression to pick yourself up by your own bootstraps, because a computer is simply a piece of hardware and it needs to run programs, software. And how can the hardware run software? It needs an operating system, which is usually Windows if you've got a PC, or Linux if you're a rebel. But that operating system is not in the computer when the computer is switched on. It has to be loaded up from another device, which could be inside the computer, could be the hard disk. But in the very early days, computers didn't have hard disks, and the programs normally had to be loaded manually. And it was called a bootstrap loader. The very first thing that you put into the computer was called the bootstrap loader. And this was because it was like picking yourself up by your bootstraps, which is impossible really. But this was akin to how you had to get the computer going. You had to put in a little program, usually by flicking a few switches, which would then tell it to load another program, and then another program, and then maybe eventually the operating system. And then you could run your application software, whether it was your word processor or anything else like that. And it seems to me like this is like ideation. We've got this initial bootstrap loader, this little notion of making a connection between things. And from that it just expands and expands and expands. And this is what it seems to be saying here. In the previous paragraph it said, the ideation begins to germinate and to grow. It multiplies naturally by itself and so on. It fills up all of space, so to speak. This is like the bootstrap loader, which loads bigger and bigger programs. But this unreal non-substance is yet able to grow, this process of cognition. Your birth, therefore, is unreal. Your existence surely is unreal too. When you know this and realise this, the unreality ceases. So this unreality is about notions. Notions don't exist. Does a notion have an existence? They certainly can motivate people and have a lot of very dire consequences, but they're unreal.